It was just 5 days before the 2016 election, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who of course would go on to be White House press secretary, tweeted this: "When you're attacking FBI agents because you're under criminal investigation, you're losing." What a difference a year makes.
It was far from a silent night or holiday weekend for President Trump on Twitter. A new round of tweets have him facing off against the FBI.
FBI cannot, after all of this time, verify claims in dossier of Russia-Trump collusion. FBI tainted.
Trump is trying systematically to discredit the FBI. The president hates the investigation. He fears it, and he wants to shut it down or curb it as much as he can.
That was the news today, and the president personally singled out the #2 person at the FBI, Andy McCabe, accusing his wife of taking money from what Trump called Clinton puppets and suggesting he's racing to retire. All of this follows reports that the FBI's top lawyer, James Baker, will be reassigned. Both moves are seen as agency responses to what is very clear now in the light of day, a growing strategy by some on the right to undermine the FBI as a way to try to muddy up Special Counsel Bob Mueller. Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert said today Mueller's, quote, out for a scalp.
He can't go fast enough. Anybody that has that much disrespect for the Republican Party, for the President of the United States, this goes way beyond just having a political opinion like everybody does. So Mueller, I have said since day one, since he was appointed, he's bad news. He's out for a scalp. He would love to get Trump's scalp. He would love to be the hero of the left to take out Donald Trump.
Do you have faith in Mueller?
No, I have no faith in Mueller. I haven't from day one.
Hard-hitting question there, by the way. Meanwhile, Republican Congressman Francis Rooney making news, calling today for a, quote, purge of the FBI on MSNBC.
I'm very concerned that the DOJ and the FBI, whether you want to call it deep state or what, are kind of off the rails. People need a good, clean government. I would like to see the directors of those agencies purge it and say, look, we've got a lot of great agents, a lot of great lawyers here. Those are the people that I want the American people to see and know the good work's being done, not these people who are kind of the deep state. The deep state. You need to see that because that is the partisan fever in parts of the Republican Party calling for, their words, a purge of the FBI. But that's not all that's going on. Take a look at some nonpartisan experts striking a different note. Intel veteran Michael Morell, who served the Bush and Obama administrations and rose to the top of the CIA. You may recall back before Trump's election, he was one of the clearest voices on the danger that Putin posed through Trump.
Donald Trump didn't even understand, right, that Putin was playing him. So in Putin's mind, I have no doubt that Putin thinks that he's an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation, although Putin would never say that.
An unwitting agent. He might have been onto something. Remember, that was before a lot of the attention on Russia that came after the election. Well, Mike Morell's back with something you have to see. This is in today's Washington Post, and he co-authors a very serious article sounding a blunt alarm, arguing Putin is still aggressively disseminating propaganda to weaken our nation. And he argues that this perception that Russia ended its social media operations following last year's election exists, but that perception is wrong. Writing, Russia's information operations in the U.S. continued after the election, and they continue to this day. Two very different views of the same scene. Joining me now, David Frum, a senior editor for The Atlantic, Matt Miller, former spokesman for Attorney General Eric Holder, an MSNBC analyst, and Joe Weinbanks, a former Watergate special prosecutor and MSNBC analyst as well. David Frum, two views, one based in reality, the other based in, I think what's fair to say, has grown over the last several weeks into a full-throated attack on the FBI.
But it's working. It does work. The FBI needs to be seen as above suspicion. This is an agency, remember, that has a dark past, a dark past where it has participated in American politics in a way that it should not have done. So it's very important to the culture of the FBI to be seen to be above suspicion. So if you have the President of the United States and a party in Congress endlessly saying that the most routine things are indicative of fatal bias, improper bias, you can change the behavior of the FBI. And so normal communications that people would have about their political views, that FBI agents are allowed to have, that occur in the ordinary, that becomes something impermissible, a sign of bias, and you step by step, the agency is changed. Donald Trump and his supporters are saying, unless you have people investigating him who begin with what nobody would have, which is total ignorance and total detachment from the events of the past year, then therefore they're out to get him. You know, cops are often out to get people whom they think are kind of guilty, and that is not different here, but it is working. It is working.
Matt, do you agree that it's working? I mean, this is a bureau that very recently was seen under Comey and others to basically operate highly independently, almost to a fault. And now David argues, and this is concerning for the nation, that in a relatively short period of time, Donald Trump, aided by this outside effort, has kneecapped it. I will read one piece of evidence as example. New York Times reporting both people in the Bureau today and former FBI officials say Trump's criticism and those of normally supportive Republican members of Congress have damaged morale. Senior agents express fear if their names appear in the news media, they'll be singled out for attacks by politicians.
Yeah, look, I think that the attacks on the FBI have certainly demoralized the Bureau, and they started back during the campaign. Let's remember, the FBI has had a really rocky year and a half going back all the way to Jim Comey's handling of the Clinton investigation. Not the decision not to bring charges, but his highly unusual decision to give a public statement, which we know really rankled a lot of people inside the Bureau and led to a great deal of controversy. And so for them to come out of that tough year in the election and now be under attack constantly by the President of the United States, it does have an effect inside the Bureau. But I think the worst effect is what you see inside the Republican Party. You know, you showed that clip from Louis Gohmert. I sat through a number, countless, dozens of Judiciary Committee hearings during the Obama administration where he was spouting, really what were then fringe conspiracy theories about the Department of Justice. Those theories are no longer fringe. They are now the mainstream view of the Republican Party because the party is led by, someone who has kind of equal disdain for institutions and equal disdain for objective truth. That has now become the mainstream. These attacks on law enforcement, on anyone who will question the president, have become the mainstream view of the Republican Party now, and that will have consequences when Bob Mueller finishes his investigation.
Yeah, and Jill, there's something really sad, weak, and pathetic about that. The people who have public service careers, who've spent decades saying the opposite, are brought to heel within what? Within a year of joining this effort?
It's more than just that, and I agree, Ari, completely with what you said. But it is also a possible obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and it's obstructing justice by saying to agents, you better not dig too deep, you better not find anything, because I will attack you. And this is the President of the United States. It is congressmen who have a national audience and can make people's lives miserable. So if you're interfering with an investigation by doing that, that's obstruction of justice. And I think it's a serious threat to the investigation and to democracy.
Well, and isn't that what makes this a scarier staring contest, Jill? I mean, to build on your point, what's under investigation is the president's efforts to end or impact the Russia probe by potentially obstructing it. I mean, that's part of the whole deal with Comey, right? And so now the response to that is to say, in your view or your theory here, is to what, out-obstruct the obstruction that's under investigation?
It is. And I think, what's getting confused is this started out as an investigation of Russian meddling in our election. And then in connection with that was whether anyone in America, anyone in the Trump team, was conspiring with the Russians to do that. So that was the first investigation. But then very quickly it evolved into, I'm looking at an obstruction of that investigation, of whether the Russians interfered and whether anyone in my team helped them. So when you get to the obstruction, you have the obstruction evidence is starting to get clearer and clearer and clearer. You have the firing of Comey. You have the threat to the FBI. You have the moving of Baker to another position. You have the possible firing or pushing out of McCabe. And in the same time, you have 18 days of Flynn staying in office, even though everybody knew that he was guilty and that he had done something that he shouldn't have done. He had lied to the vice president, and they may have even known that he lied to the FBI and was under investigation for that. So really has become full circle, and the venom coming out of the White House toward the FBI is a dangerous and harmful thing.
Well, and David, as Jill walks through those names, I think it actually serves to underscore what a mismatch this can be, because Mr. Baker, for those of us who've been around this, like Jill and Matt and yourself, may be a known quantity, but to most of America, he's not. So having the president, throw these rhetorical bombs at him does have an impact. This is what Jim Comey was moved to say, and this is a rare public statement from Comey since leaving government. Sadly, we're now at a point in our political life when anyone can be attacked for partisan gain. James Baker, who's stepping down after, as FBI general counsel, served our country well for 25 years and deserves better. He's what we should all want our public servants to be. Go ahead, David.
Let me clarify what I mean when I say this is working. So the very fact that the president has been able to accelerate retirements from the FBI or accelerate movements of personnel, and maybe these were things that were going to happen anyway, but they weren't going to happen this month. They have happened. Mm-hmm. The message that has been sent inside the agency is if you start discovering the truth, your career may be in danger. So don't look too hard. Meanwhile, it's one thing when, Louis Gohmert, even within the Republican world, is not a highly respected or credible force. But there is no counterbalance. And what he is saying has been picked up. It's been printed on the Wall Street Journal editorial page by scholars from the Hoover Institution. And you can see in Congress many reputable people or ambitious people. Ron DeSantis, who wants to be governor of Florida, who was used to be a fairly moderate kind of Republican. He's signing up for this because the governorship beckons. And meanwhile, you see no one, even of the Republicans who say, let this play out, let the investigation go to its termination, no one is willing to take the risk and stand up to the president and say, please stop interfering with the FBI. The incentives for the agency, the incentives for the president, the opportunities for him, those are all blinking ever clearer.
Matt, do you want to co-sign David Frum's dark warning on this holiday evening, or do you have anything brighter for us?
I will, and I'll say I think for career agents, what they ought to do is do their job and not worry about that. But it's very tough when you see things like people's, the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, being asked about agents by name at a recent congressional hearing, and asked whether they had any political bias. That's very intimidating for career agents. But what needs to happen in these situations is that the leaders of these departments, the director of the FBI, the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, need to stand up for the career people that work for them and defend their honor and their integrity. That doesn't mean Chris Wray has to come out and have a press conference every time the president says something off the wall on Twitter, but he does need to pick his moments where he tells the general public. They need to hear this not from Democrats, but from Republicans and Republicans who have been appointed by President Trump, that this agency, the FBI, is going to follow the facts, follow the law wherever it leads. Attacks on them in this manner are inappropriate, and the FBI will do its job no matter what the president thinks.
I think that's well put, and it goes to the larger arc here for those patriotic Americans who are in government, where patriotism and self-interest probably combine. Because you can look at the examples of Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein trying to go along with Donald Trump's first plan to fire Comey and really beginning to ruin in a day or two careers that were built over decades. The idea that if you're Chris Wray or someone else, you're going to bob and weave and sit this out in a way that maintains your integrity or helps the FBI is unlikely, and that is all the more of a call for action. Matt Miller and Jill Weinbakes, thank you very much.